So all of these different benefits combined is why there's so much interest in this particular habitat. You're probably quite aware of these issues, but you're kind of like, right, what can I do? Where can I get these things from? And this is what we're trying to help you with. Show these images. A lot of people feel, it's like UK waters. Wow, this is amazing. Choose a marina that's got that. And if they haven't got one, ask them why they haven't got it, because if they're allowing anti-foul runoff from power springs, how this works is the species will attach to it, and under its own weight will just peel off because it just can't attach to that surface.
So yeah, in case you haven't met me yet, I'm Charlie. I'm one of the directors at Ardent and an instructor. This kind of topic is really interesting to me because I've spent a good while working with different marine conservation charities. So a lot of my sea miles have been on boats doing different research expeditions and surveys. It's also relevant to everyone, whether you're on a day skipper course or a yachtmaster course. The subjects in this are relevant to the marine environment module, so you'll go over some of the concepts we have here, but this talk I'm hoping and I'm excited for a bit more detail on some of them, but it is really relevant to whichever course you are doing with us. So yeah, without much of further ado, over to Kate, who is campaign manager for the Green Blue and our special guest this evening.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me along this evening. I hope that I'll be able to provide you with some of the environmental best practice that we present from the Green Blue. Before we go on there, I just want to give you an idea of what I'm going to be covering. So first of all, give you a bit of a background of who the Green Blue is. Some of you may have heard of the programme before, but I can give you a bit more insight. And then I'm going to go through some of the sustainable boating advice. Now, we have lots of different topics we cover, but this evening I'm going to go through these three main ones, which are anchoring and mooring with care, and that's protecting our seabed habitats. Invasive species prevention, and finally looking at the sustainable use of resources and looking at reduce, reuse, repair and recycle. We've only got just under an hour, so there might be points where I will either whiz through quite quickly on some bits and move on, but we'll see how we get on. Towards the end, I'm going to share some useful resources with you that you can take away as boaters to enable you to action and become more sustainable. And then I'm looking forward to presenting you with the boating pledge, and I hope that you will all take the pledge by the end. And if we've got any time for Q&A, then that'd be fantastic, and I would welcome any questions throughout, so do pop them in the chat. But yeah, at the end I will try and answer as many as I can. Okay, so first of all, if you're not familiar with the Green Blue, it's the RYA's environmental outreach programme. It was first launched in 2005, so next year is going to be our 20-year anniversary, and we're really sort of pioneering in the area where we were looking at the impact that boating can have on the environment, and how we can do our boating in a more environmentally sustainable way. And the reason for that is one, because we love being out on the water, and I think we all have an inherent belief in wanting to protect that. And it's really clear over recent years that the benefit we get in terms of our health, well-being, enjoyment is really important when we're out on the water experiencing it, and therefore we have a need to want to protect it. We also get sort of external pressures, I suppose, from government, different agencies, other organisations, where they feel there's a responsibility for boaters to minimise any impact that we may have. So it's great that we have the Green Blue programme and that we're able to develop information, guidance and resources to help you as a boating community. To give you an idea of the kind of work that we do cover, so we have key campaign work, and at the moment we're focusing on climate change, biodiversity, water quality and sustainable use of resources. And under each of those, we then have very focused campaigns. So when I just went through that content, we looked at anchoring and mooring. That would very much come under the biodiversity and helping to protect our seabed. And then making sure we're choosing more sustainable products made of more sustainable materials, and making sure that we're recycling where possible those items at the end of life. It comes under our kind of sustainable resource umbrella. Like I said, we create guidance and resources. We have, the Green Blue has its own website, but that will be getting merged into the main RYA website soon. So that will happen in the new year. We try and identify and promote more sustainable products and services in the boating sector. And again, we have something called the business directory on the Green Blue website that shows you different products that you can use and swap in that are more sustainable. We also develop educational activities, not just for instructors, but also for young sailors as well, and also for scout groups, etc., to help pass on education around sustainable boating. And we deliver workshops, talks and webinars like I am now, and we usually have event stands such as the Southampton Boat Show, the RYA Dinghy and Water Sports Show, and other boating shows, because that gives an opportunity to engage with you as boaters, hear what your concerns are and see where we can help you from that environmental sustainability point of view. And wherever possible, we try and develop partnerships to help further our campaign work. So we love teaming up with people to share knowledge, experience, and reach. Just to give you an idea of the plethora of environmental topics we do cover, and if I covered those this evening, then we would be here for a fair while. But any of these, you can go and get specific guidance information on the Green Blue website, so you can go and explore that afterwards. But I hope this just gives you an idea of the kind of breadth of focus that we're looking at. And from year to year, the kind of campaign work that we focus on will change depending on external government pressures and also what the science is telling us and what we need to prioritise. So the first sort of advice or sustainable boating guidance is around sustainable anchoring and mooring. And literally in October, we just finished a partnership in the Remedies project, which was a 5-year project. And you can see at the bottom there all the different types of partners that we've been working with. And this was to restore seabed habitats, but also to protect them as well. And it's been a very successful project. And over those 5 years, we've been delivering webinars such as these on sustainable anchoring and mooring, and we have seen an increase in awareness and an increase in boaters actively wanting to adopt more sustainable anchoring practices. And I hope from what I'm going to take you through now, you will also go away and start adopting that. So just give me an insight into the Remedies project. We were working in 5 sites in the south of England, and these sites were identified because Natural England felt they were in unfavourable condition. And that was in particular looking at seagrass beds. There were other sites around England, and also around the UK, but these are particular sites that they identified and where there was an overlap in intense boating activity. And this project, just to be clear, is very much focused on recreational activities and the impact. So it was looking at bait digging, other types of recreation. But from our perspective, as partners from the RYA Green Blue in the project, we were focusing on educating boaters and supporting them in helping to protect our habitats. So why are we trying to do this in the first place? Why is protecting habitats such as seagrass so important? Over the years, and you might have seen it in the news, the project was actually on Countryfile as well. Seagrass is renowned for its ability to be a nursery ground for various fish species and habitats. Sneaky peek there. It also absorbs a lot of carbon dioxide for a marine species. So there's lots of interest around blue carbon with this. And it's been shown to absorb more carbon dioxide than some of our key tropical rainforests. You can see here the iconic species, the seahorse, but there's all sorts of different species that rely on this habitat. It's just the seahorse seems to have been renowned around it. The seagrass also helps protect our coastline. So you can see here, it's very much like grass. It has root systems that go into the sand and that binds it together. And then it can absorb wave action and the sand sediment as well. So all of these different benefits combined is why there's so much interest in this particular habitat at the moment. But it is under threat, not just from recreational activity, but from climate change as well. And also eutrophication, which is nutrient overload from the land, so that's fertilizers entering the water. But as a boating community, we need to be doing what we can to protect it. And where there's very acute areas, such as very sheltered bays and coves, which we love to go to for our anchoring and mooring, unfortunately, it's also an ideal place for seagrass to grow. But we want to continue visiting these beautiful places, and therefore, let's see how we can try and protect it. And I'm just going to show you a little video here that the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust filmed. And if you do sail in the Solent or around the Isle of Wight, then this is sea view. So it's very relevant to our shores, but this will give you an idea of how amazing our seagrass beds are. So what you're seeing here is a video clip, very shallow waters, and the video team here were able to kind of snorkel above those. So if you're out on the Isle of Wight near Benbridge, for example, you can snorkel off the beach there and experience this seagrass. And when we show these images, a lot of people feel, you know, is that in UK waters? Wow, this is amazing. And I think that's a really difficult thing we have in the UK, is trying to visually show what's underneath the hull of our vessels and draw that passion. When you're in crystal, you know, clear waters and turquoise, there tends to be this kind of draw of, oh, you know, this is beautiful, want to protect it. But actually, we have beautiful places here as well. So you've got stalked jellyfish there. So a lot of the species that rely on seagrass also are rare in themselves and protected. So what the guys are doing here as part of the Remedies project is they're collecting seeds, seagrass seeds, because they then harvest those and cultivate them in a lab, and then they go out to replant them to restore them in new areas. But that kind of gives you a really nice visual, I feel, of what we've got in our local waters and under our hull. So what's going on with recreational boating and how are we impacting these beautiful habitats? Well, first of all, when we're anchoring, the anchor itself obviously embeds into the seabed and can damage the fronds and roots of the seagrass. And also the chain that's laid out on the seabed here, you can see in the image, as the boat shifts around in the wind and tide, that chain will abrade the seabed. And also with the chain, you've got all the links there. So when it's loose, the seagrass kind of settles in between the links of the chain. And then when the boat becomes taut, because it's being pulled by the wind or tide, the chain then becomes taut and it will snap the fronds in between. There's a lot of belief that by digging up seagrass roots, they will float off and re-establish elsewhere. Unfortunately, because the success rate of seagrass is limited and the seed production at the moment, that theory isn't correct, and it would take, you know, probably a lot of great conditions all coming together for that seagrass floating off of its roots to then re-establish. And the problem is here we've got very pristine seagrass beds and we want to keep them that way, and make sure the abundance and quality of them is maintained. On the right hand side here, you can see where someone has deployed their anchor and it's dragged through the seagrass. So you can see that scarring effect there. And if you've got an area where there's lots of anchoring going on simultaneously throughout the summer period, you can see you'll get these patches, sort of dead zones. And that makes it very difficult for the seagrass to recover. And again, the quality isn't there. So the extent might still be there, which is the kind of area, but when you look within it, the abundance is low. And that's what Natural England were surveying. The abundance, the length of the fronds was not in favourable condition in those 5 sites. The other impact is the moorings as well. So I guess it's similar to anchoring, but with the moorings, they're more permanent. So I guess in some respects, that is better than anchoring. You can see, though, on the left-hand side here, when you've got a mooring, the chain length is designed for the maximum high water. But as that tide drops down, you get more chain lying on the seabed, and then of course it's going to be swaying and rubbing. So how can we design these mooring systems better to minimize that impact? Over on the right hand side here, don't know if anyone knows where this is or has visited. No. Okay, so this is in the Isles of Scilly, and this is St Mary's Bay, and here you can see all the boats dotted around and little circular halos. So the dark patches are seagrass, and then the circular halos is where the chain around each of those moorings has abraded the seabed. So this really gives us a visual demonstration. Originally in St Mary's, it was just anchoring. So it's probably worse back in the day, whereas now it does have moorings. But the next step is, can we make these moorings better and minimize that chain abrasion? So again, I've got local waters in Southampton. So this is Osborne Bay off the Isle of Wight, and this was a boater who took a underwater camera out, who was volunteering as part of the project to film the impact of what a traditional mooring system, swing mooring system, can do to the seabed. So many of you may have gone to Osborne Bay, even when you were doing your training, you might have gone over, stopped for lunch. There is a beautiful seagrass bed there, and you'll see it in a minute on this film. But what you've seen there is the traditional sort of anchor block on the seabed. Again, that's taking up space where a habitat could be growing. And as we pan out, following the chain away from that center anchor point, you'll see where it's been rubbing and scarring as it pivots around. And then you come to the edge of that chain length area, and then suddenly you see the seagrass. And this is the dramatic difference we're seeing from those abrasion points. And this is great video evidence and footage to kind of bring that alight to us as boaters. So that's what it should be looking like. So in terms of boating and seagrass, when we were doing webinars early on, the first thing boaters were saying, like, oh my God, yeah, absolutely, we want to protect seagrass beds. Where the hell are they? If the tide is in and we're choosing an anchorage spot, how do we know where to anchor? So yeah, absolutely. There are intertidal seagrass species, but then there are ones that are fully submerged all the time. But if you're coming in on a boat and you're trying to decide to anchor, or preferably choosing an anchorage before, then you kind of want to know where the seagrass is so you can make an educated decision to anchor outside of those areas. So as part of the project, what we try to do is support with that. So the first thing is we worked with Natural England to create an online national seagrass mapping tool. And I will give you a QR code on the next slide. So if you want to get your cameras ready to scan that, great. And it will show you, because it's Natural England, unfortunately, it is just England. But you can zoom in on the map like Google Maps, and you can identify where all the seagrass areas are. But these are just the known surveyed seagrass areas, so there might be more. And of course, seagrass does shift around occasionally as well, but at least it helps us get an idea of where it is, and maybe choose a different anchorage spot or anchor in slightly deeper waters. On the Green Blue website, we have an anchoring and mooring with care webpage, and we do have maps on there for the 5 sites, and we have links to the Wales seagrass areas and also a link to that Natural England online map as well. As part of the project, we've also been developing these information panels. So in the bottom right-hand corner here, these are big signs, 100 centimetres by 75 centimetres, that will be getting installed across the Solent. They're already installed in Plymouth, and they're going to be at marinas and harbours. And the idea here is you'll see it's a nautical chart at the bottom, and it will show you exactly where the seagrass areas are and any voluntary no anchor zones. This one in particular is of the Solent, and in yellow, it will show you a new voluntary no anchor zone, which exists at Osborne Bay now. And in the top right-hand corner, you can see an example of the markers, which tend to be yellow, that indicate the boundaries of those seagrass voluntary no anchor zones. The reason we wanted it to be nautical maps is, one, it relates to us as boaters, but also we can look at the depth contour lines. And if we can see where the outer edge of the seagrass areas are in relation to the depth contours, we have a better idea of where we can deploy our anchor outside. Rule of thumb, you know, if you can't get look at one of these maps or anything, rule of thumb, in most of the southern coast of England, the seagrass is growing in depths of 5 meters. So if you can anchor 5 meters out in that maximum high water, then that's the ideal place that you need to be. Isles of Scilly is slightly different. It's 10 meters because the water clarity out there is so good, and it's one of the best places for seagrass. So if you are visiting the Isles of Scilly, do take an opportunity to look at it, but try and avoid placing your anchor there and making sure your chain isn't going to then shift into it as well, because that's something else to think about. What we are working on is, a lot of people have reported back saying, why not have it on the electronic charts? So that is something we are working with. We're in conversations with the Hydrographic Office and some of the key electronic chart providers. And what we'll be doing is providing them with the data. But where I'm doing work is I am keen to have consistency across the electronic charts. So the symbols, the colours of the seagrass, and also locations of new mooring systems, which I'm going to show you in a minute. These advanced eco mooring systems are located, and the voluntary no anchor zones, and ensuring that the symbols used on the charts are similar. So as a boat user, you might be chartering different vessels, and at least if you're looking at RYA Marine or IMRAE, or navionics, you can recognize those symbols straight away. Otherwise, if we kind of let them go on and do it themselves, you might end up with all sorts of different things, and that becomes a barrier for us as individual boaters. And this is just to give you a close-up of that national seagrass there. This is the kind of one of the best things we've got for England at the moment, until it goes on to the electronic charts. It's just, you go on the internet, you've got the QR code there. Again, it's on our anchoring and mooring website page. Just click on it, takes you straight to here, and you can go and explore, zoom in and see where it is. So yeah, really, really interesting. So again, this is our traditional moorings. So how can we improve these? So what we've been exploring as part of the 5-year project is installing alternative mooring systems. And this is the first one. It's called the Sterling mooring. And actually, it's very kind of, I say it's a simple adaptation to a swing mooring, but there is a bit more science behind the position of the floats on the chain. Essentially, it's to lift the chain off the seabed to minimize that abrasion. And it's a less expensive option than some of the more expensive eco moorings. There's several of these down in Corsand Bay in Plymouth on private moorings. Over in Yarmouth, off the Isle of Wight, there is 2 visitor moorings there that are the Sterling moorings. So if you're going over there, you can use those. And this is becoming a kind of a more affordable option, if you like. There is an alternative. There's one called the Flex mooring system. And what we have here is, instead of a big anchor block, it's the same with the other one as well, actually. Instead of a big anchor block, we have something called a helical screw. And you can see what that looks like on the right-hand side here. That's a 2-meter helical screw. It's usually used to secure jetties, piles. It's used in construction. So it's not new technology. It's just they came up with the idea of, oh, actually, we could use these for mooring systems. Obviously, the substrate has to be right to be able to drill down and install these. But you can see in the middle photo here, the top of one of those helical screws, and you can see where the potential is here for habitat to grow around it. Now, the next component, which is provided by another company, is a flex riser, and there's a few companies that have designed these. So one of them is called Seaflex, which is quite a robust one. They use that for stabilizing pontoons, floating hotels, restaurants, like out in Dubai. And then there's one called Hazelet Marine, and Hazelet Marine is the one you can see on the right hand picture here. So you've got the helical screw, and then you've got this black elastic riser with 2 orange floats attached, and then it goes up to the buoy where you would moor your vessel. This particular mooring system is the ones installed at Studland Bay, and the great news is 87 of them have now been installed there, and that has been a really great win, because it's allowing boaters to still go into that place for weather and security, and because it is just a beautiful place to visit, but it's also minimizing our impact on the marine conservation zone there, which has the seagrass. So this is a real win-win in terms of where technology is really supporting us, and we're just hoping more boaters visiting there will pick up one of these visitor moorings rather than anchoring, and it's that whole kind of educational piece. And there is a small charge for it, like any other visitor mooring, but that charge goes back into maintaining these moorings and doing the education and awareness work around seagrass and the boating community. So what do you need to do to protect seagrass? So let's summarize this. First of all, you need to locate where the seagrass areas are when choosing your anchorage. So when you're plotting and doing your routes of passage and you're planning and you're choosing those anchorage spots, take a look at that seagrass mapping, and eventually when we have it on the electronic charts, use that to decide, you know what, we're not going to anchor there, we're going to anchor somewhere else, or we're going to anchor outside of it, and actually plot your waypoints to that anchorage point location. The next thing is, even better than anchoring, use an existing mooring system, go into a harbour, use a pontoon. So then you're not involving the anchoring at all. I know that can be expensive sometimes, and there is pleasure and what have you in anchoring in an isolated place. But where you've got these places like Studland Bay, where there's a hell of a lot of boating and it's very intense, then trying to use a mooring and going into a marina is recommended. The next thing is, yes, you've got your traditional moorings, they're already there, but the next best thing is using advanced eco mooring system if they're available. And we're hoping more and more will get put around the UK coastline. And it's happening abroad as well. So if your last option literally is to anchor, then when you're deploying your anchor, it's basic RYA training here. And it's really, you do it because you're trying to protect the safety of your crew and your vessel, but avoiding anchor drag. So looking at your waypoints on, looking at your points on land, reference points, making sure there's no drag, making sure it's firmly held in there. And that very much relies on having the right kind of anchor. And we're looking here at sand is where seagrass grows. But of course, we're not going to have lots of different anchors on our vessel. So you've got to go with the best one or what you have. Keep the chain length to an absolute minimum. So when you're doing your RYA course, you'll know that it's 4 times the depth if you're using chain, or 6 times the maximum depth if you're using chain and warp to deploy, and trying to keep it at that absolute minimum. You might be tempted to go, you know what, I'm going to put an extra couple of meters out, just to make sure my boat's extra secure. But those extra couple of meters can have a dramatic impact. And I'll show you a diagram to represent that. So, for example, say you've deployed so much chain and you've got 6 meters lying on the seabed. Some of it's obviously going to be rising up to the bow of the vessel, but let's say there's 6 meters lying on the seabed. If that did a full pivot in wind direction tide, let's just say, then it's 130 meters squared abrasion area. Let's say we add a couple of more meters on, like we were saying, suddenly 8 meters on the seabed goes up to 201. That's nearly double the amount of abrasion area. So when you go for a larger pizza, when you next get your takeaway, you're getting a hell of a lot more for that, for that extra few inches on the outer side. But I think this really just clearly represents that, those choices you're making, your crew on the foredeck there. If you've got automatic chain release that tells you how many meters you're deploying, that's really good because you get the accuracy. If not, you've got the guy on the front of the vessel here flaking out the amount of chain per meter. Obviously, if you're trying to anchor quickly, that might be a little bit more tricky, but you'll find you can put markers on your chain. And I think Anchor Right won some awards at the Met's trade show recently for having these sort of plastic markers that you can put between your chains, and they're secure and they won't fall off and cause plastic pollution, which we don't want that either. Others paint the chain. Some way of being able to count and see how much to get that accuracy is really important, because every little bit helps. So everything I've just explained there, and in a nutshell, is in the Green Blues Anchoring and Mooring Guide. So you can download this on the Green Blue website. You can scan the QR code here to access it straight away. And we also have them available in hard copy. So if you prefer that kind of hard copy format, if you're an instructor yourself, we're really encouraging instructors to maybe order a batch of them. And then when you're doing your training, you can give these out to your students. I know it can be tough on some of the instructor courses, fitting in the environment element to it. But this is a good way of at least giving your students something to take away and a discussion point at lunchtime. But on the Green Blue website, we do have some great instructor resources as well, like quiz cards and things around sustainable boating. So they're really popular. Right, so that was anchoring and mooring. I spent a lot of time on that because it's quite an important area that we're working on, and we're getting a lot of questions around that. I hope you found that interesting. The other element of our work around biodiversity is invasive species prevention. So we do this for inland waters, but also coastal waters. Predominantly historically, we've looked at invasive species on inland waters because invasive species impact the water companies, and they've been funding a lot of our educational awareness, not just for the RYA Green Blue, but lots of other organisations to try and raise awareness to anybody using our waterways for activities. So the Angling Trust are involved in that, Paddle UK, etc. So before I go any further though, some of you might be, what the hell is an invasive species? So I'll give you a quick little overview. So first of all, we've got things called non-native species. And they're basically species that don't originate from the country that they've arrived in. So they've come from either another region, another country. So they don't naturally occur in the site. So in the UK, we might have species coming over from abroad. They're not naturally from the UK, but they arrive. Now, they're non-native species. There's a lot of them out there in the UK, but they're not causing any problems or harm, and they seem to have fitted into our ecosystem quite well. Now, when they start to become invasive is when they cause adverse environmental impacts. And that's when invasive gets put on the front. I've given you the example of the red squirrel here and the grey squirrel because that's really well known for people. That's a terrestrial animal invasive species, but we have aquatic ones. And these are some of our marine aquatic species, invasive species at the bottom. So you've got Pacific oyster. So when you're cleaning the hull of your vessel or you're looking at your outboard engines, inlets and outlets, you might spot some of these. And if you do, it's really important to remove them. But I would hope with the advice I'm going to give you, it's not going to get to that stage. We see a lot of the Pacific oysters coming from yachts traveling, obviously from Americas. And I've seen boats getting power washed down in the Hamble River, and these Pacific oysters are lodged in the outboard engines and around the hull. Really, those species should have been removed when they were in America and not brought over. Got Darwin's barnacle, tufty buff, I love that name, trumpet tube worm. So you can see that's really spiky and angular, so it can cause a lot of damage there as well. So why are we concerned about invasive species from a boating perspective? Well, first of all, when we look at the environment, generally, we've got disease that's brought in by these species. They outcompete our native wildlife for space. They can smother our own wildlife and stop them from growing. And you can see in the bottom right-hand corner here, this carpet sea skirt is smothering mussels. And carpet sea skirt it's nasty, and there's a reason it's called carpet, because it literally smothers everything. And they had this issue in Cardiff Bay, where everything was coated, nothing else could grow or establish, and they had to spend huge amounts of money bagging up pontoons, trying to eradicate it. The problem is, once they come into the UK, you cannot eradicate them, but you can manage and minimise the risk of them spreading, which is where we can come in. But if you are abroad and bringing your boat back, please make sure it's clean before you bring it back to the UK. Economic damage to boats, the boating equipment, it gets into inlets and outlets and breaks those. And you can see some of the species on the equipment here. And of course, we then have to spend lots of money on anti-fouling as well to prevent the growth of these. It can impact on aquaculture. And a lot of that is developing around the UK waters at the moment. So we've got economic impact there. And like I said, the removal costs are in their billions. It costs the government 1.9 billion a year dealing with invasive species. So tax money is going towards this. And if we can contribute towards minimising it, great. In terms of boating activities, it blocks our inlets and outlets, blocks navigation routes. So definitely on our inland waterways, we've got floating pennywort. You can't get the narrow boats through. It's a nightmare. It gets caught up in the propellers. We're going to have increased bifouling, which is already a nuisance for us as boaters. And does that mean we're then going to have to use more anti-fouling, especially with climate change and species migrating north as well? And it will damage equipment. But yeah, these photos just give you a bit of an idea. On the left there, you've got Pacific oyster absolutely covering the River Yelm. And what they do there is they tend to like to bring their boats up on shore, but it's very risky underfoot. It's damaging the boats. And they have something called oyster bashing down there. So you can go out as a volunteer and remove the oysters. And like with all invasive species, if we can find a way of putting them on the plate, get a famous chef cooking something like the crayfish or what have you, then it creates an economic growth there and helps remove them. Up in the far right-hand corner, can you guess what the trumpet tube worm's growing on? That is a pontoon fender. So you can't even see the fender anymore. And like I said, if you put your hand on it, it is really scratchy and brittle. And as soon as you break it, all the bits go off in the water and it just helps to spread it. This is in the Itchen River, again, down in the Solent. And the mariners were a bit worried about this, so they were trying to help and they started chipping it all off the pontoons, chiseling it away. Problem is, it spread it all over the Itchen River. So when you think we're trying to help, actually, sometimes it's an issue, and you have to really collect these invasive species up and put them into general waste bins to be taken away. So that's really the only way we can stop that. Now, what can we do as boaters? Well, like I said before, the first thing is we can anti-foul to prevent the biofouling, and this also helps to prevent invasive species attaching and therefore being transported. There's different types of anti-fouling. Yes, it has its positives in terms of invasive species, helping with fuel efficiency, reducing drag, but it also, for the ablative paints, has an environmental negative impact in terms of water pollution. We're trying to encourage the sector and boaters to come away from using ablative anti-fouling because of the pollution risk around it, because the ablative anti-fouling is biocidal and will have copper and zinc in there, and it naturally leaches into our waterways as our boat moves around. But also there's a massive high risk of when you're applying and removing that anti-fouling, drips, drops, spills going onto the slipway, into the boat yard, and then the rain comes away and washes that all in, and you've got heavy metals then sitting on the seabed, and as we know, they're toxic, and what that's doing to the organisms, but also the water quality as well, is a concern. So what are the alternatives? Now, affordability is a big thing here. Some of the alternatives are a little bit more expensive. The ablative is, what I mean is, it wears away quickly and it leaches off the vessel. Hard copper coating is probably the next option. It's not a soft coating like the ablative, it's hard. Yes, it's still got copper in it, so it is still toxic to species, but it leaches at a lot lower rate. So it leaches at about, I think it's 1.4 micrograms a centimetre squared a day, and the tolerance level by the Health and Safety Executive is 9 micrograms, so it is well below, but it is still leaching. It is a more affordable option compared to maybe some of the others like silicon, but it is a lot better than the ablative anti-fouling. So in terms of affordability wise, from an RYA's perspective, that is a good way to go. Silicon coating is the next one, which doesn't involve any of this copper and heavy metals. It is applied like paint, again, on different layers to the hull of the vessel, and it usually has to be done professionally, so that's where the costs go up, and it will vary depending on where you're getting these anti-fouls applied. If you're in a very expensive area like Hamble, then it might be slightly more than somewhere else, so it's worth looking around. And with the silicone coating, there's varying feedback on this. You can see it in the top right hand corner here. So this was the previous chair of the RYA. This was his vessel. He got silicone on there, and he'd like to send me photos of his clean bottom, as he liked to put it, because essentially you can see here, all he had to do is use a very soft sponge and water spray, and it just came off really easily, the algae, and hardly built up, and he won quite a few races out of it as well, and he felt it was something to do with the slippery surface. But essentially how this works is the species will attach to it, and under its own weight will just peel off because it just can't attach to that surface. This coating is really ideal for boats that are submerged in the water most of the time. Where we are having difficulties, or mariners are, is when they are put on the chocks. It can rub away at the silicone, so that it needs to be padded and supported. Also, some mariners are worried about them slipping around in the harnesses when you bring them ashore. But some mariners have found ways around this, and I feel that that's not an excuse, because if we're going to start using these more sustainable alternatives, we need to start adapting our operations and how we lift these kind of vessels. And if some mariners have done it, then I think it is possible for others too. There's also vinyl coating, and you can see that in the bottom right hand corner there. So I think it's Grapefruit Graphics. They used to do graphics above the waterline, and now they're creating these vinyls. Again, it's that very slippery surface, a bit like silicone. All of these alternatives that aren't paints and that don't leach are helping with water quality, but in the back of our minds, we're also concerned of what happens to the end of life of these. When these vinyls have to be removed, you've got plastic. So, I wouldn't say it is a sustainable option. I'd say it's an option to minimize water pollution. But later on down the line, we need to think about how we recycle these vinyl coverings. Another one in the middle at the bottom here is a biomimetic anti-foul coating, and this is Finchulate. So it's kind of like a carpet that mimics a sea anemone's surface, because sea creatures have this ability to be able to prevent algae and species growing on them. So what is the surface of their skin looking like, and how's that helping? And what the anti-foul companies are doing is trying to mimic that. So there is one that mimics shark skin as well. So there's lots of different layers of scales, and I think they come off with it, and it just means that the species can't establish. And if you can get rid of that lower algae level, it stops all the macro organisms attaching, like the mussels, etc. So what can we do? We've got our anti-fouling on there, hopefully a less water polluting one, but we need to follow the check, clean, dry procedure. So what do we mean by this? So first of all, you need to check different equipment, parts of the boat, to see if there is any plant or animal matter. If you can see that, the sooner you can see that, the better. Remove it and leave it where you found it. If you're doing that regularly, then hopefully the species where it attached is left where you found it, rather than you transporting it to a new location. Unfortunately, yeah, some species do get in there, we don't notice them, and then we might move on, especially where we've got yachts. If you've got dinghies, smaller craft that are getting taken out of the water all the time, it's easier to clean those and move them around. But ideally, if you're anchoring, when you're pulling up the anchor, if you've got fouling on it like this, you want to remove that straight away, leave whatever you've picked up and deposit it back where you found it. Otherwise, next place you're going to anchor at, you're going to drop off invasive species. And you may look at that and think, oh, can't see any animals or plants, mustn't be any in there. They're small embryos that you cannot see, and then it'll establish elsewhere. So having that thorough check and cleaning is really important. And if you do find any species, even if it's on your powerboat, on shore, your tender, anything like that, remove it, put it into a waste bin. Making sure that we're cleaning our vessels regularly. So ideally, the guy here with the brush on the right hand side is removing that thin layer of algae before anything else can grow. And under regulations, if you can't remove the biofouling with a soft brush or sponge yourself in water, that vessel has to be removed, like in the middle photo here, and properly cleaned before you can leave a marina and go somewhere else. The regulations back in the day didn't even allow you to do the in-water cleaning that the chap here on the right's doing. And you needed a permit to be able to do that as an individual boater, because you're depositing biofouling on the seabed. And when we spoke to the GB Non-Native Species Secretariat, which we work very closely with, and DEFRA at the government level, we said, in that case, boaters are breaking the law all over the place, because that's what they're doing. So through the RYA and British Marine, we managed to get those regulations adjusted, where now boaters can remove with a light sponge or brush without requiring a permit. So that was something of the work that we've done behind the scenes there. But ideally, if it gets worse than that, you're going to be transporting them somewhere else and adding to the problem. Outboard engines, flushing them out. Yeah, give me a good power spray. What the picture here is at Deacon's Marina on the Hamble River. And if you go to a marina that has a filtered bunded washdown system, so here you can see there's a concrete bund around the edge where he's power spraying, and in the center there is a drainage grate. Now these systems are great for two reasons. One, they capture biofouling that doesn't just run off into the local waterways, and then the guys or gals in the marinas or boatyards can collect that up and then put it in a bin. But also the filter system in the middle captures any anti-foul residue and filters it off. So choose a marina that's got that. And if they haven't got one, ask them why they haven't got it, because if they're allowing anti-foul runoff from power spray to enter the water, they are a trade site, and technically it is breaking the law. So they either need to have a filter system on site, or they need to be putting in a very small amount of contamination into the sewage works, and they need an environmental permit to do that from the Environment Agency. So asking really helps, because when I go and visit marinas, I'm here to support marinas. They'll say, oh, well, no one ever asked us. No one ever, our boat users, our customers aren't concerned about it. So, you know, if they're the ones who are our customers. So then I go on the other side and say, you know, it's a two-way thing here. But it is good that marinas are taking more responsibility now. And we have the Clean Marina program that the Yacht Harbour Association has. and that means they're meeting environmental credentials. So if you are going to marine and they've got that, then you know that they're meeting those certain aspects. So take your custom to those ones. And then finally, invasive species can survive in damp conditions for long periods of time. So ideally, keeping your equipment out of the water in the first place so they don't even attach, drying them out, cleaning them with fresh, clean water. And they usually say with clothing and things, what you can, if you can get it to 50 degrees Celsius, it will minimize the survival rate of these species. If you've got boats, tenders, engines, builders, draining those, making sure they're drying out. If you've got smaller vessels that you can leave out to air dry before putting covers over the top, towel drying, exposing your vessel to UV light, because the UV light again minimizes survival rate. And then even using a dry berth or dock, and you can see some of the images that are available. So not only the mariners optimizing putting more boats in and storage is actually quite good because it's helping the boats dry out, less invasive species transition, and also it will help with boats not needing as much anti-fouling. So it's quite interesting new technology there and options. So I'm wary of time, so I'm probably going to move on from the reduce, reuse, repair, recycle. So I'm just going to whiz through that and then get on to kind of the helpful resources and the pledge. So a big key thing we're trying to work on here is making sure that everyone's kind of following this hierarchy when it comes to purchasing products. So the first thing we say is avoid anything that has, you know, more harmful ingredients. So it might be cleaning products, for example, using eco-friendly cleaning products, avoiding buying anything with microplastics in or that is single-use plastic. And then the next one down is reduce, just reducing how much we're purchasing. Do we need all of this stuff? Do we need 5 sailing jackets? Do we need, so we've got a habit in our society of buying. And as soon as something becomes faulty, we're less likely to look at repairing them as well. But there are lots of outdoor organizations and companies repairing jackets, waterproof jackets and things. Less so maybe specifically in the sailing sector, but all of our equipment we have polyester jackets transfer into the outdoor mountaineering, and there's stuff going on there. And what I'm hoping to do with the Green Blue section on the RYA website next year is presenting what those options are for us to take our jackets to be repaired and recycled. I know I've got a Musto jacket where the zip went, perfectly decent jacket. I don't want to go and get another one. And if I can just get the zip repaired, fantastic. So that's where we need to sort of get back to. So reusing, so passing on, donating to others, repairing where you can, and recycling really comes down the bottom here. And then looking at recycling options, and your last resort should be disposing, because that's where it's going to go to landfill and not put back into the system. The way to help boaters with selecting more sustainable products made out of more sustainable materials or ingredients is we developed the Green Blue Business Directory. And what we try and do is identify new sustainable products and services in the boating sector. And we list this on our directory on the Green Blue website. So just to give you some examples, we've got electric inboard and outboard motors, solar panels, wind turbines, sustainable clothing and gear. So that's recycled polyester or it's organic cotton, etc. Sailcloth made out of recycled plastic bottles, polyester and rope. Cleaning products, water and bilge filters, bio-epoxy resins, boat recycling facilities. So there's loads on there and we're continuing to populate that. So if you want an alternative, go and have a look. We are going to make this more fine-tuned, the directory, next year, which I'm looking forward to. So it'll be more categorized and easier for you to locate things. Just to give you some examples of some of the products on there, you've got English Braids, who have a rope range made out of recycled plastic bottles, and Marlow Ropes is the same. EcoWorks is just one of the example of the companies that are doing eco-friendly boat wash products, washing up, teak deck wash, all very boating specific stuff, and all uses enzymes rather than harsh bleach chemicals, etc. Bottom left, Elvstrom Sails are making sails out of recycled polyester. You've got loads of companies converting sailcloth into new items. although it doesn't solve the biggest sailcloth issue, because I think it's about 97% of our sails go to landfill, which is not good. So there's a lot of work we're doing in this area at the moment with various organisations, which is quite exciting. Halyard, these are filters, so you can have water filters and bilge filters on your yacht. And if you've got a pump out line for your bilge, you need to install one of these. It's just an absolute no-brainer. So you've got the smaller little one here, and that filters out any oil debris out of your bilge. So there might be microplastics in there when you've been doing work, you know, how the little bits, it's really hard to clean up. It will capture all of that, and then you can dispose of it in hazardous waste, and it won't go out into the environment. And a small one like this, about £100. All new vessels pretty much have these installed, but if you've got an older vessel, definitely look into one of these and get it fitted. They're amazing. And then we've got electric outboard engines and inboard, and people who are retrofitting yachts to be electric. In terms of recycling of sailcloth, you've got these organisations that you can send your sailcloth to be recycled. And then what's really exciting in this area at the moment, there's a company called Sustainable Extraco who have got lots of government funding. It's two brothers, one's a scientist, PhD, and the other brother's done lots of sailing in big competitions and looked at the issue around sailcloth and all of our equipment. And they've come up through university lab tests studying, and they're able to now recycle pretty much most of an element of a sailcloth. One of those being the artificial vanilla ingredient. And they can basically strip sailcloth right down into liquid form. And I think it's called vanilla, but basically it's a synthetic version of vanilla. And they're now selling that to the perfume manufacturers and food, so they can put it back into their manufacturing, which is amazing. And they've now started a thing where you can request a deposit bin at a club, a business, and get those dropped off and collected. And we're going to have one at the RYA Dinghy and Water Sports Show on the main RYA stand, so visitors can come and drop off their sailcloth. Another great thing happening in the neoprene area, so wetsuits, is circular flow. They're taking in old wetsuits. You can send them off to them in the post, collect them as a club or a training centre, send it off, and they'll turn it into all these fantastic different products. So again, this is really great stuff that's happening. People are making, you know, a business out of it, business case and money. Okay, so finally, helpful resources. I've mentioned some of them already. We've got the Green Blue website, section for you and your boat and how to be more sustainable, clubs and centres. So if you're running a club or you're a volunteer or you're part of a class association, we've got loads of resources specific to that. And then we've got information for boating businesses as well. And you can see at the tabs there, you've got a whole resource section, our business directory, get involved, is like our campaigns, accreditations you can get. Just go and explore. There's loads of different things on there. In the resource section, we've got our Green Blue boating guide. So you've already seen our anchoring guide one, but we've got one for coastal boating, inland boating, and we've got our wildlife guide, and you can download these. And it takes you through top tips on all the different topics I showed you at the beginning. So bullet pointed, very quick top tips. And again, if you want to give these to your instructors, then you can either pass them on digitally, and some we have in hard copy, but we're going to start coming away from that because we want to reduce the paper. But at least letting your students know about it is really important. We've got our environmental facilities map. So again, this is an interactive map that you can go on and you can find your nearest facilities, your recycling facilities, water refill stations, that filtered bundle washdown at marinas that I was telling you about earlier, charging points. And this is all about us helping you as boaters to go and take that action. So you're probably quite aware of these issues, but you're kind of like, right, what can I do? Where can I get these things from? And this is what we're trying to help you with. And if you feel there's any gaps, anything that we can help, then we would love to hear from you. And then finally, you've got the Green Blue Boating Pledge, which I would absolutely love everyone who's watching this webinar to look at the QR code here, or you can use the URL at the bottom there and make the Green Blue Boating Pledge, which is to respect, protect and enjoy our boating environment. And it's to follow key environmental best practice that anyone can adopt. And this is what they are. So under the respect, protect and enjoy. And these are all things that are affordable. Anyone can do it. Some of it may not apply to your type of boating, but there'll be something in there that you can do. And it's just to help you, give you that very quick sort of checklist of these are the things we can do. And if you go to the pledge page, there's also drop down information that explains a little bit more behind each of these points. Like, what does minimize noise mean? What does minimize wash? Why should I be doing that? So it kind of takes you off on that. So please, yeah, do take the pledge. We've got, I think, 1,300 pledges currently, and we're building on it. And the great thing about this is we can go to industry and really show the boating community are passionate about the environment, and we need more products and services to help us protect it. And also, it's just great to be able to get the numbers of how many passionate people are out there and ambassadors for our sustainable boating community. That's it.
Thank you so much, Kate. That's, yeah, fantastic. Really interesting. Thanks for all the work you've done with the Green Blue, because it is, yeah, really important. And yeah, it's brilliant.
Okay, Charlie, when the house bears about 270 degrees.
Information to work out our distance from the lighthouse and use that.
We might be perfectly on track, but if we're not on time...
Have a look, I've got my phone here at the effects it has on our steering compass. Our echo sound is working, we can find a contour and follow it nicely into port.
Our left hand is pointing towards the centre of the lull.